Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we proudly bring to you Mormonism Live!
Shut up and sit down.
Good evening, Mr. Real. How are you doing?
Radio Free Mormon. I couldn't be better. If I was any better, there'd be two of me.
Well, that could only be a good thing. The world can never have enough of Bill Real.
There's not enough Bill Reals. That's right.
I think I just butchered Thoreau there.
That's
but I really
okay.
love this. I love the shirt you have on. Is that a new shirt?
It is a new shirt. It's got like pastel floral type thing going on.
I'm thinking David Cassidy, early 1970s. You're rocking it, man.
All it's missing is that little spritz of chest hair coming out at the top.
Yeah, that's okay. He didn't have that either. He had a pristine and nubile body.
Yeah, look at that. Not me. I can only imagine. In fact, I'll even let it stop there because I look way better with clothes on.
Okay, I'll take your word for that.
There
By the way,
you go.
chest hair, if he'd had chest hair, I don't think I would have found him anywhere near as attractive.
Oh, see, there you go. So
Yeah.
you like men with no chest hair, huh?
I do. I prefer no hair. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Well, how's life treating you this week?
Well, this has been the best week of my life.
Best week of your life.
Yes. I'm
me
lying, of
why.
course, but you don't need to know anything more about it. Yeah,
Okay.
there's some funky stuff going down in the city, but hey, I'm a professional. It's showtime. Ready to rock and roll. We got a special guest on.
We do. We have Carah Burrell, which I'm going to bring on here in just 2 seconds. And there she is.
There she is.
Carah, how are you doing?
Hey, fellas. I've already told you I'm doing terrible. Why'd you ask?
Well, because it's just a common thing. Straight from the boudoir, Carah Burrell.
The boudoir. I should have said that earlier to my husband tonight. I'm retiring to the boudoir. What for? Do a podcast with two lovely gentlemen.
Look at that.
Anyway,
Yeah, that would be the two Bill Reals that we just
the
talked
two
about.
Bill Reals.
any-
I
if that
can't
was
tell
any
them
better.
apart.
So
glasses.
let's
I'm
start
doing
off.
great now that I'm talking to you. Sorry.
I know.
don't
We're
wanna
gonna make you
start with
forget
negativity.
all
I'm
your
doing
troubles.
Great 'cause I'm talking to you.
This is going to be therapeutic. By the way, this reminds me of a funny thing happened on the way to the podcast.
Hey, I get
What
that.
did you do today, Carah?
Oh, I just engaged in a mental exercise of shutting up for 5 hours so that I don't lose my ever-loving mind talking to a Mormon man named Rod Meldrum. Very nice human, don't get me wrong, who has some very fundamentalist ideas around the Heartland model of the Book of Mormon. And yeah, I just had a bunch of brain cells just completely tell me they can't do it anymore and just decided
done.
to just kill
Wow.
themselves off. So I had a
Good.
rough day, but I'm really grateful that Rod decided to be on the podcast. What are we talking about? Mormon Stories is the podcast. And I'm grateful we did it, but it was really emotionally taxing.
Your
So
brain
are you
cells.
converted? Oh, go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
please.
I was just going to say your brain cells. It was like a million voices cried out and then suddenly went silent.
Yeah, I'm only human.
Are you converted to the Heartland theory?
Am I converted to the Heartland theory?
Yeah,
No.
I mean, 5 hours of the Heartland theory. You should have a testimony and be a witness at this point.
I know. I am the opposite, but it wasn't that I wasn't because I wasn't open-minded. Like,
Right, you were trying.
I was there to listen. I was not convinced, though.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really grateful to you going to those different conferences, if there's more than one or at least one of their conferences, and exploring the fact that it was completely new to me, that
Mhm.
I was not aware prior to this, that the Heartland theory seemed to encompass a whole lot of other issues, which are very fundamentalist in nature. I didn't know that, whether it's the 7,000-year-old Earth
Yeah.
in terms of Adam and Eve falling 7,000 years ago, the global flood, the literalness of like everything in the Bible, and the Book of Mormon. But I had no idea about that. And that there's a huge ice crystal in the middle of the earth. This one really stunned me because I'd never heard this before about the global flood, the deluge, that there's water inside the earth. And in order for it to come to the surface, God spun the earth like a top a little bit faster. So the centripetal force would kind of force the water out to the surface, causing the global flood that even was as high as the highest mountain at the time. And then when the flood was over, then God just sort of slowed the earth back down in its rotation so that the water would go back to where it belonged in the inside. And now it resides within the earth as some kind of giant ice crystal. Did I understand that correctly?
That's my understanding mostly.
That sounds like a lot of conjecture.
Yeah.
A lot of allowances.
Yeah. And we kind of started, it was a long day, you guys. Like, we kind of started off about that model, and John Dylan asking Rod like these direct questions about like just trying to like get on record. Do you believe this? Do you believe that? And asking them, what do you believe about the core of the earth? And yeah, that was a true thing he believed, because you start with the presupposition that there was a global flood. You will look for evidence to support that no matter what. And so one of the things that Rod said at the very beginning was like, and that's just like, hello, there's so many cultures around. Like according to him, there's just dozens and dozens of cultures that have global floods. And how could there not have been a global flood? I'm like, could it be a coincidence?
Doubt your doubts.
Doubt. You guys have a board in there? Jeez,
we have a soundboard. Yeah.
This is a sophisticated program you're on tonight, Carah. I don't know where you've been before.
You have an
this
intro.
Is top notch. Oh yeah.
You have me. No.
Yes,
anyway,
absolutely. You are the jewel within the ring setting.
Say that again, RFM. Sorry.
Oh, Carah is the jewel within the ring setting that is Mormonism Live.
I'm the broken prong. So we're gonna go real easy on you. We'll go really easy on you tonight because you're obviously worn out. So what we wanted to do was decide whether there is free will or not. Is there free will?
Should we ask and answer the most important question of all time when Carah has 4 brain cells to her name? I'll just tell you right now, free will is an illusion, and it's not a sad thing to announce that. It actually is inspiring. It inspires me to love people more and to do all of the things I do, because I realize that people are not just subject to like Satan's chains the way I believed in Mormonism. Quite the contrary.
Yeah.
And it colors everything about my faith crisis, as you guys kind of know that we've talked about already. But
So without necessarily adopting wholeheartedly your view, does it at least imbue you with a new love for Rod Meldrum?
It does. No, actually, I was going to talk about that.
Okay.
Totally.
Good.
Totally. So I characterize everything from starting with, I see people as products of their genetics and their conditioning. And who's to say if me and what I know of myself was transported into somebody else's body, like Rod's, or like any other person that I disagree with wholeheartedly on things, that have opinions that I think are wrong and harmful and don't weigh evidence, who's to say that I was born to their parents with their genetics, with the upbringing that they had, only talking to the people in their circle with that conditioning. I can't really judge how I would act differently. So I can be like the noticer of my thoughts, their thoughts, and then try to work in a system that reforms and encourages behavior as a wider scope. That makes sense? So like, I have a ton of love for people, because people don't choose where they're born. People don't choose their influences. We can only be the noticers of our influences. So
you'd be a Heartlander.
Yeah. Like if I had a different set of circumstances, who knows what I would believe and stuff. So it is not a depressing fact that, in my opinion, that free will doesn't exist. It actually is endearing, and it helps me love people more.
Everybody's doing the best they can.
And I think that's a great aspect of your position, that there's no free will. What I want to know is, what is a TikTok influencer doing if there's no free will of people to influence?
Okay. First of all, if I get called an influencer, if I have to live with that label, I should have to make money off of being an influencer, which I don't. I make money off of being a podcaster. So I've never like said, hey, buy this product because I've influenced. So I just want to say, should I start, since I already have to?
Well, could you do your first promo for Mormonism Live right now? Do it off the cuff. We'll record it and we'll play it at the beginning of every show.
Okay. Get ready, everyone. Buckle in your seatbelts. It's time for Mormonism Live, endorsed by nuancehoe. Carah Burrell. It's the reason I'm an ex-Mormon.
Dun-dun-dun.
There you go.
Boom, baby.
Anyway.
Perfect.
So RFM there just made a fallacy argument. The idea that you can't influence people in the midst of there being no free will isn't true. People can encounter new information today and it will change the choices they make tomorrow. They just don't have any free will as they're making the choices.
Yeah, my favorite thing about free will is the sentence that, like, I can't choose to be confused. I have no choice over whether or not my brain is confused about new information coming into me. And I also can't choose that information, like a domino, is convincing. Mind blowing.
Yeah.
So if people's brains are in a place where the things that their values are already, let me start over. If people already have a value that's placed within them, that's already conditioned within them, in my opinion, they're going to then filter in new information based on that value. And then where you get that value from comes from a place behind that, and that comes from a place behind that, and that everything comes back to the parents that you were born to and the society in which your brain grows and develops within.
Yeah. All right. So I want to jump into, I don't want to do free will first. We'll give your brain a slight break.
Fine.
Cool. So let's start with this whole thing from Dogma. I'm really tickled pink about this, by the way. You were really influenced by an episode I did for the Cognitive Dissonance podcast.
I'm obsessed. I am obsessed. Okay. The reason why I wanted to do this podcast is just to talk about that podcast.
Yeah.
Continue.
Please. So what I want you to do is set up for us what went on there. And I think there's a little clip we have, right? Is that from this? Is it from the debate for Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, or is this the free will thing that the clip's the free will, Maven? Okay. So the Dogma stuff going on, Cognitive Dissonance, it was on Dogma. I essentially took Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris's debate in Vancouver, Canada, and I talked at length about Dogma, and that was heavily influential to you. And I want to at least give you a chance to set up any part of that conversation that was meaningful to you. And then we can all just kind of riff for a minute about what was going on there.
Yeah. So you mentioned that Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson are talking about different types of dogma, and just kind of off the top of my head, how I would describe dogma is like an unchanging authoritarian view of what is true. What do you guys think is the definition of dogma?
That seems good.
Okay. And unwielding to new evidence. And so they're talking about the problems of dogma, whether it's in a religious context versus you can have dogma, outside of religion with like Nazis or something, and the harm that is unique. I know. They mentioned it.
I hate these guys.
They did. I did. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. But trying to tease apart the difference with religious dogma and why it's so dangerous. And if you can't take an outsider's perspective as to, okay, I wouldn't allow this kind of dogma. I would, if new information comes up, I would change my mind. But then when you add a religious aspect into it and you're like, I can't change my mind because I already promised and covenanted that I wouldn't do X, Y, and Z. And Mormonism is very, for Mormonism having so many things to do with like personal revelation and like line upon line, precept upon precept, Mormonism does actually change a lot slower and is a lot more authoritarian and dogmatic than Mormons, I think, realize. And so what your podcast did was had very specific examples of like, can you see the way when you're looking at another religion or another system that is tied to dogma, that is tied to something that's unchanging, how harmful it is? And then when it happens within Mormonism, are you willing to take in new information and see what's going on here? So
isn't it amazing? Your allegiance to the system plays such a huge impact on whether you can consider evidence that conflicts with your dogma, right? But if you look at an outside system where you have no allegiance, I look at Scientology, I know it's bullshit. So when someone says, hey, here's a reason it's bullshit, you go like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. And there's so many good examples and so many things that I probably bring up from that podcast on Mormon Stories that people are probably annoyed for me in saying. because you always hear about leave the church, leave it alone. And my number one response to that actually comes from an epiphany I had before I listened to your podcast. Sorry, it's not all about you, Bill.
No,
But
by all means.
there was a Twitter guy that I was fighting with. I was a very like conservative, like outspoken Mormon back in the day on Twitter. And there's a guy named Brother Mike on Twitter, and his pinned tweet for the longest time was like, does anyone realize that like it was ex-Mormons or progressive Mormons that pushed for like boom, 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 and he just listed like, you know,
All of it.
all of that stuff. Like, I mean, everything has come from agitators. Is kind of his point. And that's the point that you make in that podcast, Bill, about like that it is the system that is supposed to serve the people. And if people cannot reform dogma when it's harmful or contradicting with the evidence and new information, if the people who are supposed to be served within that system cannot have an avenue to speak out against the dogma, then what are we freaking doing here? Like, what's the point of being served by something that's crushing people? And so I loved his tweet because it really helped solidify like the enemies to me at the time were like the progressive Mormons and the ex-Mormons. And I realized that if I want Mormonism to be a better place, if I want it to be healthier, to serve the people I love, you have to have a way to reform it. And Mormonism doesn't. And that makes it, sorry, the word toxic's overused. It's toxic that it doesn't have a good way to reform it. And in fact, it has a good way of covering it up. Like Bill, you mentioned in that podcast, it's like when changes happen in the temple, it uses the veil of something being sacred, that you can't talk about the changes that are happening within the system. So if it does change and it does reform, they want to either gaslight you and say that it's always been that way, or that it was revelation or whatever. And it's never given credit to the agitators. And so what I like to do on Mormon Stories is when people say, you know, leave the church, leave it alone, I'm like, who do you think made Mormonism tolerable for you today in 2022? It's the agitators from the bottom up and the outside in. And I call I'm the outside in now. I'm an ex-Mormon, but the things we do, you guys, me, other different podcasts and people speaking out, has real world consequences because Salt Lake still pays attention to it. And we give a voice to the people that are supposed to be served within Mormonism that are also like being trampled by it.
They don't even know until we push for the change happens, and they're thankful it did, right? Like most Mormons are grateful the November policy got taken away. Most Mormons are grateful that now a second parent can be in the room or a first parent can be in a room for an interview. And there's so many thought-stopping techniques. You know, you raise your hand in the negative at General Conference, right? Or you stand up and you say, I'm opposed. And that happened. I'm not going to say any much. I don't know if she wants to come on and talk about. I probably shouldn't even say that.
I'd love to hear about it.
I know.
Oh, Maven's here. Why are you here, Maven?
Hey, maybe.
I'm throwing you under the bus here, Maven. What did you do recently?
So recently, I took a cue from Alana and Jane, actually, who are here today, by the way, and Nemo really kind of started this whole thing. I always thought it was kind of a silly idea, and I've even told Nemo this. I was just like, people don't vote opposed, or it's just so rare. It's like to stand up in front of all of your peers like that in a formal setting. I was just like, it's just not a real plausible movement. But like when he did it, and then when Alana did it, I just was really inspired. My heart was pounding just like watching them do it. And I just thought, I thought I could see why it's still good to do anyway. And so I felt like I do want to do it, and my stake conference was coming up. And so I did it. And now I have an appointment to meet with my stake president at the end of the month. So,
and that's my point. It's a thought-stopping technique. So in the moment in Mormonism that you raise your hand and say, I'm not okay with what's going on here, somebody just takes you and reroutes you back into the circle or gets you the hell out of the way. There are so many things in Mormonism where anytime you have a contradictory thought, there is a mechanism in place that is there that's designed to either get you back in line or put distance between you and the sheep. Anyway,
there were actually a lot of youth speakers, which I kind of liked because they were all like right there on the front row. And so
they saw it.
I don't know. I was like, I hope I'm being an example. I don't know. Probably.
And why have it? Like, why have the ability to raise your hand and vote opposed when it doesn't do anything? It's like the apostles say they get in a room and they talk everything out and they take a vote. But we already know from Hugh B. Brown's Apostolic Charge that it doesn't matter how they vote. Whatever the majority is, they all leave the room outwardly telling the crowd that they all voted unanimously, even when they didn't. So it's another thought stop technique, right? If you're Elder Christofferson in a room and you raise your hand and go, I'm just not up for picking on the gays, then suddenly they basically go like, well, 8 of us are for it. So you're going to walk out of the room and you're going to go ahead and act like you're for this thing. There really isn't this freedom to navigate these messy issues and get better in real time. It really does take 40 years for a bunch of old guys to die and for suddenly there to be 12 guys in a room or 3 guys in a room or 15 guys in a room that all unanimously go like, okay, now we can change it. Finally, the old guard is out. And it causes us to make changes so damn slow that we look so damn unhealthy. Even when people like Sam Young push for us to be able to have adults in the room besides just one person interviewing a kid, the church comes along and goes, Sam, you're out. You're done. We're going to stop that thought. And then the next thing they do is they make a change, but the change is half-ass, right? Like most parents don't even feel the empowerment like, oh, I should have another person in the room. And so essentially the church goes on with the majority of interviews still being done by one leader, which is exactly what they want. But now they get to act like they're doing the right thing. Like if a parent wants a second person, they can have one. And the reality is most parents aren't pushing for it because their outer authority is the bishop. It is the stake president. It is the leadership of the church.
And it's saying that they don't trust the bishop.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, can I just make 3 real quick comments here? Number one, unless they've changed the language again, I think it says that if the child wants a parent in the room, then it's okay to have a parent in the room. Isn't that right, Bill?
If somebody on the interview, the person being interviewed side wants a second person, they can have one.
Okay. Second thing is the old saying is that progress is measured one death at a time. And the third thing, before we leave dogma, I got to tell you my favorite quote about dogma. I've said it before. Now, the 2 ladies here, were you alive in the 1980s?
I was.
One of the years.
One of them. Okay. You remember Alf?
Yeah.
Oh, a great show. Great show. So my favorite line about dogma comes from Alf where he says, yuck, that's worse than dogma. That's dog manure.
Don't remember that line.
Okay. We'll have to pull it up and play it at some point so we can violate all sorts of copyright issues.
And what else?
That was 3. That was all 3.
That was all 3. Okay.
I did them very quickly.
Okay. And before we move off of dogma, I just also really loved Bill's podcast. This is literally just a commercial for everyone to go look up the Cognitive Dissonance podcast.
There we go. I shared it in the comments.
I've literally never listened to anything more. I listen to it. There's very few things that aren't music that I listen to more than once, and that's Maria Bamford's comedy albums, and that's Bill Reel's Cognitive Dissonance podcast with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. Your breakdowns in that, like, it frames everything that motivates me to do the things that I do. So the other thing that I loved about it was that...
Were you a believer before that podcast? Before Cognitive Dissonance altogether, were you a believer?
No, I'd lost my faith by the time that I'd found that.
So I can't take credit for that.
No, you can take credit for me losing my faith, though, mostly. So, and my husband. Mostly. So the reason, let's pause and just say the reason I'm here doing any of the work that I do, and that's an amazing, cool privilege that I do get to be involved in making content, validating people that the church is false, and you have lots of good reasons to leave, and validating them on that, and making them laugh on the way out, and all of the fun things that I get to do. This space is I'm just incredibly lucky, and there's a lot of really amazing people I get to work with. So just putting that out there. The reason that any of this is happening is because my husband, a couple years ago, we bought a house. We were remodeling this house we're in right now, and we were all just listening to podcasts while we were working on our house all the time. And my husband told me later that he was trying to look up something to listen to, and he heard that like this RFM guy was good, and he went and he found one, and the name of the podcast was "Why Are Mormons So Fake?" I think was the name of it. And he was like, I feel like if I listen to this, I will probably leave the church, is what he said in his head, because it was just, he needed one last domino, like the free will did not exist. He was already conditioned to value truth and was like, if this guy's going to speak truth, let me listen to it. I don't know. So he listened to that. And then for a long time while we were working on this house, my husband's in his headphones, just like these. These are the exact ones he was wearing, actually. Funny enough. He's listening to all of this stuff that's kind of helping him understand and detangle himself from the church. And I'm listening to the opposite. I'm listening to Christian sermons and like conservative podcasts and stuff. So I'm like, we're on two different paths. So he left the church kind of before me, fell out of love, detangled himself from the church much sooner, and I didn't know about it. But the funny thing, I've already told you guys this, I'll tell the listeners that the funniest way that I started listening, and because I was just like, this is anti-Mormon stuff. I'm not, what are you doing? What are you listening inside there? I was all afraid, you know, your whole eternal family is going to be gone and wiped out if your husband leaves the church, all that
The
stuff.
Holy Ghost isn't very powerful, is he?
No, especially I'm in the same house and I don't even know that my husband's being led by Satan.
I just mean that the Holy Ghost doesn't protect you. Like if I listen to something critical, the Holy Ghost will obviously help me sort it out.
Yeah. So I like to say that the number one person that I do attribute to helping me fall out of love kind of with the church would be Sam Harris. And it was because I think 60 to 80% of it was me listening in my headphones to his podcast all the time, working on this house, realizing that free will was an illusion. And if free will is an illusion, how does the narrative about the war in heaven and God presenting this plan with his spirit children, and they're going to be able to go down to earth and they'll have free agency. Free agency is it is the most ludicrous idea, and there's no evidence that we have free will or free agency or that there's any real merit to the system for God to be able to judge us one day. It makes no sense, and nor would I worship a God that put people into that system. And that's kind of one of the other main things that I brought up on the podcast today with Rod about, even if this Heartland model of yours was true, isn't that weird that God created a system where 8 billion people are on earth right now, let alone like, you know, let's say 50 billion who've ever lived. Don't quote me on that. I don't know how many people have ever lived, but just the idea that like not everyone has access to the Book of Mormon or like the evidence of the Heartland model. Who is this God that created this system where everyone has different conditioning and different genetics that make them have different abilities to accept the truthiness of the gospel and make these covenants that'll supposedly be really important for them and like less than 1% of the entire population? And I'm sounding like that Family Guy quote right now where he's like, what you working on? I'm going to do a millennial reference for our millennials because you guys have too many Alf references. You guys know the one I'm talking about. Anyone else? Anyone know the Family Guy reference I'm making? What you working on there? Anyway.
You can never have too many Alf references.
Yeah.
Harry and the Hendersons.
Anyway,
too.
point is, back on track, Carah, that the main problem that I had with my faith crisis started with falling out of love with the Mormon Jesus, falling out of love with the temple ceremonies, but really, really Sam Harris and understanding free will being an illusion, and this narrative about the gospel and free agency is a complete fallacy and lie. It doesn't make any sense. Combined with evolution, that I could not go on listening and sustaining a prophet like Nelson who didn't believe in evolution. And I just saw the church as very anti-intellectual. And again, I was very conservative at the time. I was like, you know, they talk about the alt-right pipeline. Like you'll start listening to Joe Rogan, and then you'll start listening to like Stefan Molyneux, and then you'll start listening to this, and then all of a sudden you'll be like hailing Hitler, you know? I went the opposite, and started there, and then I went more left, and I went more atheist. So you can't take a Provo girl from Utah and strap headphones on her for hours and hours a day listening to Sam Harris. Again, no free will. That's just, it was going to happen. I was going to lose my faith because they make too much sense. So accepting that evolution is obvious and that I have to be in a church that is very anti-intellectual. What do I do with that? So Sam Harris got me most of the way, but Bill, this is all coming back to a compliment for you, because the next thing was my husband said, like, I've been listening to this guy, Bill Reel, and I'm like, an ex-Mormon podcaster. I was that wife who was like, what ex-Mormon, like anti-Mormon shiz are you listening to?
May the Lord warm your shoulders.
Yeah. And he's like, and he literally said to me, Bill, sorry, I've already told you this story before, but I'll tell it again. And I grew up in a town called Port Clinton, Ohio. And my husband's like, there's this guy named Bill Reel, and he's the bishop of a ward out in Sandusky, which is like really close to the like your
In fact,
childhood.
I worked in Port Clinton. I worked at Young's Floor Covering, right there on State Street.
My old stomping grounds.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Look at that.
If you ever have been to Heinemann Winery or Crystal Cave,
Mhm.
that's my family's winery in Crystal Cave that I was never allowed to drink wine from, and I'm only like extremely bitter about it. So yeah, so I thought anyway, my husband's like, Carah, you should give this guy a chance. And I was like, a guy from Sandusky, like he's got to be a good guy now. So I literally gave you a chance based on the fact that you lived in the same proximity as me.
I
And
was right next to the walleye capital of the world.
There's no bad guys from Sandusky.
No, it's all good guys. So
There's a few bad guys.
yeah.
There was
They
a
didn't have
murder
free
like
will,
a
so
block
it's
from the
okay.
hospital.
Yeah.
What's that?
As
But
long
they
as
didn't have free will, so it's okay.
They didn't have free will. They didn't.
they didn't.
They
Anyway, there are other factors. But anyway, the point is I listened my very first podcast. I just fell in love. And I was like, oh, this guy's good. This guy's smart. This guy gets it. Like the way you articulated it. I can't remember which ones I was listening to, but I listened to, I was one of those people who I binged every single one and listened to everything. Everything made so much more sense the way you explained it. So I was really in love with deconstructing Mormonism as you do. And then I had to take a break from it because I was like, okay, I'm over it. I'm not mad anymore. And I'm like, this isn't serving me anymore. And so at the beginning of like 2020, I unsubscribed. We left the church in 2019. And then the beginning of 2020, I set all these new year goals and intentions. And I was like, I don't think this is serving me anymore. I need to stop thinking about Mormonism. It's been 6 months and I unsubscribed. And it actually broke my heart, you guys. I literally went like through like Mormon discussions and I went like unsubscribe and I unsubscribed to Reddit and I just unfollowed everything I was following. And it was a very sad 3 weeks. And then I realized that I actually really did like it. And it was good because all of that time that I was digesting like RFM, your podcast and Bill's podcast, all of that was like I was going to school almost informally for Mormonism. And now I just am able to talk about it for a living because of your podcast. So a million thank yous for that.
You're welcome.
You'll be getting my bill for the annuity in the mail.
Oh, yeah. So we touched on dogma. I think free will is a little bit of a brain exercise. And I don't know if there's a way to explain it. I did have a little exercise written down where people try to think of a movie, right? And Sam does this where he says, close your eyes, take some breaths, try to think of a movie. And then he explains as you're trying to do that. And if people can, for just a moment, try to pick a movie in your head. But notice the process of picking the movie.
Jurassic Park.
What's that?
I picked a movie. Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. Now, you didn't pick, like he said, Deer Hunter, right? Like who in the crowd thought of Deer Hunter? Who in listening did that? Nobody thought of Deer Hunter. So there are certain movies you don't know. You couldn't have thought of
might
those.
have. Robert De Niro. I don't know.
Yeah, but you didn't. If I said think of a movie,
we have
you
to.
didn't.
Yeah. So what Bill's saying is you have. Sorry,
I was just gonna say if we want to go to the clip, it's the same exercise.
Oh, let's do it, please.
Oh, great.
Do it.
Movies, but it's
shut me up.
Cities.
Okay, so it's about 5 minutes long. So I guess if we want the audience to just go along with it,
That'll
with
be
the
fun.
ride.
Before you start, before we play the clip, I watched this, and just so everybody knows going in, the city I thought it was Tokyo.
Tokyo.
All right.
Okay, let's
run a little
do it.
Now
experiment.
you've already put something there.
Think of a city, anywhere in the world. You can choose any city you want. You know, of course, I could have primed you. I could have artfully placed cues in my speech in the last few minutes that would make you more likely to think of Las Vegas, for instance. So just to be on the safe side, don't pick Vegas. But pick a city, any city, and just pay attention to what this conscious process is like. Now, the first thing to notice about this is as free a decision as you are ever going to make in your life. Okay, you have all the cities in the world to choose from, and I'm just asking you to pick one. Now, several cities have probably occurred to you, and just focus on one. So everybody got a city? No, well, I'm sorry to say that you all picked the wrong city. Don't ask me how I know this, but I do. So I just want you to do this again, just so you can see what the process is like. Pick another city, can't be the first, and notice what that experience is like. Okay. Did you see any evidence for free will? Now, we better be able to find it here. I mean, if it's not here, it's not anywhere. So let's look for it. First, let's set aside all those cities whose names you don't know and therefore could not have picked. Okay, because you couldn't have picked one of those if your life depended on it. There's no freedom in that, obviously. Okay, and then there are many other cities whose names are quite well known to you, but which simply didn't occur to you to pick. I mean, for instance, perhaps Cairo didn't occur to you. You absolutely know that Cairo is a city, but for whatever reason, your Cairo circuits were not engaged. Okay, as a matter of neurophysiology, Cairo was not in the cards. So I want you to think about this. Were you free to choose that which did not occur to you to choose? Based on the state of your brain a few moments ago, Cairo was not coming. Okay, where is the freedom in that? Of course, if you did think of Cairo, you should consider yourself a genius. Now, so you probably thought of several cities, and then let's say you thought of Paris and New York and Tokyo. And then you thought, I love Paris. I'm going to go with Paris. And the last minute you thought, no, Tokyo, I'll go with Tokyo. And now this is the sort of decision that motivates the idea of free will. You've got two or more choices, and you're picking between them, and it's just you and your thoughts. There's no coercion from the external world. You are doing it, apparently. But when you look closely, I think you'll find that you are in no position to know why you picked what you picked. In this case, why you chose Tokyo over Paris. I mean, you might have some additional story to tell about it. You might think, well, I had Japanese food last night, and so I remembered it, and I picked Tokyo. Now, of course, we know from psychology that these kinds of stories are rather often false. Whenever people are manipulated in a lab, they always have some tale to tell about why they did what they did, and it never bears any relationship to the actual variables that cause them to behave that way. So you give people, you can cause people to like one person more than another, or to cooperate more in economic games by simply giving them a hot beverage to hold as opposed to a cold one. And they never tell you that the reason they were biased as they were was because the temperature of the cup in their hands. Okay, psychology is replete with evidence that we are very poor judges of why it is retrospectively, why it is we do what we do. But even if you're right in this instance, okay, even if your choice of Tokyo over Paris is based on your memory of having Japanese food last night, okay, you still can't explain why you remembered having Japanese food last night, or why the memory had the effect that it did. Why didn't it have the opposite effect? Why didn't you think, well, I just had Japanese food last night, so let's go with something new, let's go with Paris? The thing to notice about this is that you, as the conscious witness of your inner life, are not making these decisions. You can only witness these decisions.
Yes?
Brilliant. I
Thank
feel
you.
magnified. I feel the spirit.
You mean because I picked Tokyo?
Oh, because of that. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Even if it is the Japanese food, it's not free will. Like, the Japanese food in your memory jolted Tokyo to come to the surface. You're limited in what you can pick. Even if you have a sheet of paper out and you're like, look, I have a new job opportunity. Do I take it or don't I? I got my pros, I got my cons. Like, which pros you listed and which cons you listed, which pros you left off, which cons you left off, which things you gave more weight to. It all has to do with predisposition, experience, genetics, your history. It isn't because your thoughts aren't yours anyway. The old Buddha practice. Are your thoughts you? No, your thoughts are coming Even if you try not to have thoughts, your thoughts just keep coming. It's not real. And so the moment you recognize that there isn't free will, then free agency, which is the same thing, it not being true, then the church isn't true because agency is not real.
Right.
Yeah.
But even that pros and cons list, like it is advantageous to believe in free will. That's a whole different subject
Yeah,
of
it's a
what you
different
do with
debate.
this information. Now, how
Yeah.
do you do it? And then there's obviously a lot of philosophical worked out arguments of now how do you operate in the world? And mostly the answer is like you pretend that you have free will because it's in your value to act within your values. That's pretty much how I would put it. But like to your example of like you make a pros and cons list and you really feel like you're the author of those thoughts and of those, and you're setting intentions and you're saying I am consciously choosing to go take a job in Nebraska because of my pros and cons list. And it's important for people to recognize whether it's serving a mission or choosing who to marry, the decisions that we're making, like Sam Harris, I think you just said, like you can witness them as events, but you have to actually notice that the value of why you want to serve a mission or what you value in the partner, that those are not really of your own making. Those were placed in you genetically, or they were placed in surroundings you grew up in. And then there's a whole concept of like, okay, now that I recognize that and I looked for it, we can never know emphatically. I was just reading the Free Will Sam Harris book, and it's really simple. You guys can read it in 5 minutes, but that when we're talking about like assuming that everyone knows that they're making a conscious choice at all of the time, we can't actually do that because we can't know why other people are making choices. We can't always know why we're making choices. So it's better just to, in my opinion, accept free will as an illusion and be the noticer of everything. Does that make sense? Sorry.
And this is
What
a
I
very
wanna know-
different. This is a very different thing from RFM. You said earlier, if there's no free choice, then something along the lines of why bother. But the reality
that's not
is,
it. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
There
Isn't
you
free.
influencing if there's no free will? That is my question.
Yeah.
And I also want to know, do we choose to believe that we have free will?
I would say no. I would say that the value, like my decision, like quote unquote decision to arrive at the opinion that free will is an illusion, is based on a value that I didn't even choose.
And I don't think you can help it. Like we just naturally move in the world as if we have free will, right? Like our brains tell us we do. So when you're like, oh, what ice cream do I want? Like you pick the one that sounds the most delicious in that moment. My point being, though, is that you still can change behavior. In other words, if I read the Fifth Agreement, or I read the Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz, and it impacts my life, I now have new tools in my bag. I can now show up the next day as a different human being than I would have been if I had not read the book. So it still benefits me to learn, to try to progress, try to develop, try to become a better human being tomorrow than I am today. Like that's all real. That's not connected to free will. That's simply something was put in your path.
Exactly.
Your brain told you to take it. And by taking it, you're not the same person now that you were before you read the book or watched the movie or read the newspaper or met that person and had that conversation. You're now different. And so you do show up differently, and you can be the type of person who gravitates towards doing things that makes you different the next day, but you're really not using free will. In any given moment, the choice you made was the only choice you really could have made.
Are we all in agreement
Beautiful.
that you chose to read the book?
What's that?
Are we all in agreement that you chose to read the book?
What do you mean by choose, though?
Yeah, what do you mean?
He could have read any book you wanted or watched a Hallmark movie.
No.
You couldn't have read any book you wanted. There were some books that weren't even in your view. And then there were books that your brain told you weren't interesting. And there were other books that your brain said were interesting. And then your brain made a decision without you really consciously doing it, where you said, this is the book I'm going to read for whatever your reasons are, because your parents made you like that subject. And all the other books were subjects your parents had you not like. It's not real.
Well, I can see that as a way of prioritizing things and trying to time manage. Let's just put it this way, is that I with my lack of free will, am predisposed to push back a little bit about this argument that we have no free will.
Yeah, I get it. And there is an argument on the other side, right, Carah? Like
Oh, yeah.
This isn't clean cut. This isn't Bill and Carah are right. There's no free will. There's a really good argument. There isn't. It happens to be the conclusion that we've come to. There are other smart minds who have made arguments that there is free will. But I think the argument by Sam is deeply interesting. And I think the podcast we shared was really good. In his audio podcast, Making Sense, he has an episode titled Final Thoughts on Free Will. And I shared that in the comments. I think he poses the argument a little better in that particular one, but it's audio only. But I would suggest people listen to it and do a thought exercise as you listen and try to see if what he says makes sense.
Maven, you appeared, I'll bet, for a reason.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the chat. And this was definitely something, the first time I heard it, it just seemed so wrong, obviously, when I first heard it. I think what helped me kind of wrap my head around it was just that the idea that we don't get to choose our thoughts before they have them. We really are along for the ride. We are an observer. We can see them as they come in, but we have no control over which ones are coming in or aren't. And even like with priorities and things that we choose, if we were talking about goals in the chat, you choose your goals based on what's important to you at the time. So if it's not important to you, if it's somebody else's goal or something, you're not going to go for that unless something fundamentally changes to make that be all of a sudden worth it to prioritize over everything else in your life. But until then, you can't choose to make that a priority if it's not a priority.
Maven, do you believe in free will?
I'm less inclined to believe in it now, but I haven't really done a deep dive on this, and I haven't seen many of the counter arguments. So I am curious about those now.
Yeah, I love listening to free will debates, and it's sometimes atheism and free will just get tied up because you come from like a religious background where you have a soul, and of course God, whether you're Mormon or Christian or whatever else, that there's a spirit and an entity within you. And so there's this whole other paradigm that people operate within that I believe you can have spiritual experiences. Going back to dogma, that I think Sam Harris mentions in that it's really unfortunate that it's ubiquitous, that so many people are having spiritual experiences, but then it can be tied down into some really dogmatic beliefs. And one of those is that there's a spirit that you have, and that Satan is tempting that spirit, and that you're constantly playing this mind game of like trying to stay with this, trying to keep the Holy Ghost with you always and obeying these dogmatic rules. And once you realize, I have no evidence to believe that I have a spirit. It'd be nice. I have no evidence to believe that. I have no evidence to believe that me drinking a cup of coffee makes me more prone to like Satan tempting me to do other things in a slippery slope of depravity. Like there's no reason to believe depravity. Those things. Yeah, sign me up. But like other people don't want that. But like once you end that worldview and you're like, okay, this I don't believe that I have a spirit within me that came from a pre-earth life, whether that's like the Mormon view or just any other religious view. It sometimes is just the natural way that a lot of atheists lead into. So I love listening to atheists, anybody else just debating these ideas and these concepts, because to me, this is the pinnacle of how we make laws in society, how we punish criminals, how we reform people, how we treat people, how we view mental health. Everything literally comes back to like, are humans the like actual authors of all of their choices? Or are we more like computers that can be programmed? And if they have bad programming, we need to come at this from a different angle. And just again,
a few people ask if and maybe this did happen and I missed it because I'm in the chat, but has free will been defined? There were several people saying that you haven't defined free will for this.
They're probably right.
It's the conscious ability to make a choice without being without that choice being imposed upon you by outside forces, including your thoughts, which aren't yours.
Oh, my favorite thing. Keep talking. I want to look at something.
That's okay.
My favorite thing.
Well, if they're not mine, whose are they, Bill?
They're not yours, because here, like if you just close your eyes and try to be present, if you just watch how your brain works, thoughts will arise and disappear without any effort on your part. Try to have
without, but my heart beats without effort on my part in terms of conscious effort.
Yeah.
Is the fact that they arise, and let's go ahead and say it's without effort, because I know they bubble up, they pop up, the darndest things come across the mind sometimes.
Like if I say think of a movie, name a movie?
But I meant, does the fact that they bubble up without maybe our conscious effort to bring them up, does that make them any less ours than our heart, which beats without our conscious effort?
Oh, I think they are. They are not. I think they're not ours, because I have lots of thoughts that come into my head. I have thoughts that are completely contradictory to the kind of person I think I am. I think we have all kinds of thoughts to do bad things, thought to do good things, things that contradict each other. I don't think our thoughts really are ours. They're not. I don't know how to prove that other than if you sit in still space, your thoughts will arise and go away on their own. You don't have control of your thoughts. You can redirect your thoughts, sure, but where you redirect them is also based on your life experience and your genetics and what you ate for dinner last night and what you watched on TV.
I will certainly grant that our freedom to choose is limited. And this came to me a number of years ago, because free agency in the LDS Church, it's quite a mantra, even though the LDS Church leadership seems to do its best to suppress it, if not completely do away with it among its members, while simultaneously trumpeting its importance. But it came to me that I do not have the freedom to do anything I like. For instance, if I wanted to jump 6 feet in the air, just straight up, right? I can't do that. And that would be an example of something that my agency is limited to do because of physical constraints. And from there, it became obvious to me that there are other constraints upon my choices that make agency a lot more limited than I had originally supposed. But I still think that within the options available to me, that there is agency. And one thing, Carah, maybe you can address this, because I have not studied this like you have. It's just the past week I looked at that Sam Harris video.
I told you all my brain cells are dead, but hit me.
Okay. I think that for me, the most difficult place where this comes for me to buy into this completely, because I know Sam Harris goes radical, full in. There's no such thing, as opposed to simply limited. But in those situations where there's something that we really, really, really don't want to do, but we do it anyway, or something that we really, really, really want to do that we choose not to. What do you think?
That I don't believe that we know. I think that that's coming from the assumption that we know the reasons why we do things, and we can't possibly look inside our brains and actually know at the end of the day if we wanted to do them or not. If we did, like what you just said, like that scenario you just came up with, we'd have to look inside someone's brain and see their thoughts to actually see if that's accurate, and that's how things work. I just don't believe that there's a way to know that somebody didn't want to do something and then they did it anyway, and that in that there's evidence of free will. I don't see it. What do you think?
I believe there's been studies done that kind of indicate this, that people can be manipulated like into doing things or making certain decisions by what the the people doing this study. So they'll sometimes have things happen to people on their way in, or it could be something like offering them something to eat or not. People will choose differently, but if you ask them at the end, why did you do this or make this decision instead of that, they always come up with something afterwards. They come up with something that sounds plausible to them, but again, like the researchers know, they did a specific thing to manipulate a certain outcome, and it worked, and the people were unaware. So
does it? Okay. And I don't know exactly what you're talking about there, Maven, but let's go ahead and go with generalities. Does that work 100% of the time?
That's a good question, and I don't.
Because nothing works 100% of the time, does it? You think maybe a majority, if it's a scientific experiment, they're going to say, yeah, this shows something important.
If it didn't, I would think that maybe for whoever those exceptions were, that there was probably something either that happened in their life, or maybe something different about the way their brain works than other people's. That's still
like an allegiance to authoritarianism is what I see a lot of times too. And like we're not able to choose that we value adhering to authority, for instance. Like that's not something that I can choose, but I can notice it And if I notice like harm, and that's just, I'm just a noticer of the things and the surroundings that I have. And then there can be, I have a value within me to seek out something that causes less harm. Like not everyone has that value conditioned around them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I want to close out this section because we're not going to be able to prove one way or the other. I would just suggest people do the mental
we did.
exercise.
We're done. This is going to be like in the Smithsonian playing on a loop.
I shared in the comments
There's so many. Yeah, I'm like minutes behind. I'm sorry, everybody.
No, you're good. I shared in the comments the link to Sam Harris's final thoughts on free will. I would just suggest 40 minutes long. He will go through an exercise again and again. I think he explains it better in this one. Go give it a listen and then come back next week and let us know if you've changed your mind, if there is no free will. I do want to say, though, as we conclude this part of the conversation, Sam makes the argument, and I think he's right. If we understand that there isn't free will, it makes a greater case for things like redemption, because you understand somebody is really doing the best they can, compassion, forgiveness. It cuts through the logic of retribution. That's his words. And it helps us approach behavior change much more efficiently. Once you understand that people are just doing the best they can, to affect change, you have to give them new tools. You have to change the thoughts that are going in their head so they can make different decisions. And it ends up being much more impactful if you approach it this way. Anyway,
this is starting to sound like a Clockwork Orange to me.
Clockwork Orange.
Change the thoughts inside their heads.
Yeah. You add new information.
When you're talking like systemically, kind of, you're talking about like a worldwide problem of people being brainwashed to think that like caring about the environment, let's say, is not a priority because Jesus is coming back and everything's going to be wiped out. Like to change a wide scale programming of people that, it's kind of, you have to attack things from a systemic view, because you can't, people's conditioning is going to condition them to some really backwards, stupid ideas unless you do things at a wider systemic scale, is my whole bag.
Then we must ultimately come to the question as to who will decide what thoughts to change.
Me? Can I do it? Can I?
Sure.
Can I try?
You're up for it.
All right. Now
You're the influencer here.
What do we have next? Can I fit? Wait, are we moving on?
No. Please, Phil, share a thought.
All right. Just in case anyone wanted another good definition, in Sam Harris's book, he says the popular conception of free will seems to rest on two assumptions. One, that each of us could have behaved differently than we did in the past. Okay, sit with that. And two, that we are the conscious source of are the conscious source of most of our thoughts, actions in the present. So those are two things that I don't believe in. And then everyone just sit with that. Go look at some resources. Just think about the ideas. I actually spoke at a youth event for like ex-Mormon teens back in the summer. And I talked about my favorite things, which is dogma and free will. And it's a dangerous territory, especially to get into with teenagers. But it's fun because it just is about like explore ideas that you've never thought about before. You probably your whole life thought that if you're just coming out of the church, you thought things this way. Just listen to some podcasts, listen to some books, open yourself to other philosophical thoughts on this is all I want to say. Is like, don't take my word for it, guys. This is just what this is the truest thing to me that resonates. And it helped me, literally like 60% of it helped me detangle myself from the Mormon church. So it's really powerful. So I give a good like stamp of approval to that. So it's hopefully a good endorsement for people to go investigate these ideas more on their own.
Well, I will tell you, I never would have looked at this except for the fact that you're on the show tonight.
Yeah.
And so I got some links that Bill provided and I looked at it and I thought, oh my gosh, this is like a concept. This is an argument that I had never even heard of before. And I do find it fascinating and stimulating. I like this question about, think about something, that you would have done differently in your past. Isn't that what you had said? That
just
Sam
now,
Harris said? Yeah. About consider something that you would have done differently in your past.
That free will is the idea that you could have done something differently in your past.
I'm one of the few people who has actually done something differently in my past.
You have a time machine?
Sit with that.
Actually, okay, make it full screen again. Can I tell you guys something?
Yeah, come on.
Full screen. Okay, you guys. I was thinking about something super duper hippy dippy last night. Oh no, I don't need that kind of full screen. I don't have this. I don't need that kind of stage.
Zoom in for the close-up, Bill.
Okay, you guys, tell me what you think about this. I was thinking about how strange it is. I am not spiritual. I'm like I'm pretty like 6 out of 7 kind of atheist. You guys know me, right? But I was thinking, because I've been doing a lot of mushrooms lately and so many coincidences have been occurring. And again, I'm the noticer of the coincidences. I'm not like putting things into motion. But something about mushrooms, guys, something about mushrooms is interesting. But I was just thinking last night as I was falling asleep, how that it feels like that from the paradigm of no free will. Okay, I'm kind of going on like a very high venture here, so please bear with me. But in the idea that there's no free will, it almost feels like my instinct to take mushrooms and have life-altering realizations that make me a whole new person and made my husband like a whole new person. Okay, no exaggeration. Like 2 years of depression for him, like wiped off the map almost. So I'm trying to say, like, I feel like my instincts to do mushrooms and become a better person and have a healthier marriage and have a healthier life, it feels like that wasn't even my choice to do. But then there's all of the things that goes in to that mushrooms even arriving in my hand to be able to take it, and just like the molecules, the atoms that grew that mushroom somewhere out wherever it was grown, the water that it came from, the like the fertilizer that was used, every single thing and that is part of my experience to advance as a human, all came from like 1 million bajillion to the millionth degree of previous events that occurred, of like the rain fell here and this and that came on a truck here. And there's so many things that go into the reasons why I am the way that I am right now that I had nothing to do with. And just sitting with that like, this is not like a spiritual thing necessarily, but just how cool it is that there are so many forces, that the world is so big, and that there are just like atoms and molecules that have been like working, that have been on this planet for, billions of years, that I'm now taking into my body, that give my brain an advancement it didn't have before. That's all I have to say about that.
It almost sounds like you're talking about the butterfly effect.
Am I?
Oh, a variation of it, which interestingly enough was enunciated the first time to my knowledge by Malcolm in the movie that you mentioned at the outset, Jurassic Park.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. I forgot about that.
A complete circle here.
Anyway, so if Carah gets like one chance, I've had a really shitty day, you guys know. So if I get a chance to like say anything about anything, Carah doesn't. Free will is an illusion. Go listen to Cognitive Dissonance Podcast. Find mushrooms.
Do some mushrooms. Yeah.
This will cheer you up.
And then whatever else we're going to talk about next. Dogma is the enemy. That's like my church doctrine.
Okay, so you don't want to be dogmatic about not having free will then?
No, because that would be dumb. I didn't come out of this whole religion just to be dogmatic again about anything.
And I appreciate that, and hopefully I'm not either. The thing about, you talked about the atoms that make up the mushrooms and all these things converging to you taking them and coming to your hands. I want you to know one thing, okay? Why is it that you can never trust atoms?
Because there's a joke. I know there's a punny joke in here.
Because they make up everything.
Because they make up everything. I know.
Thank you. That's a little a nod to the new Ghostbusters movie, which actually was better than I expected.
There's a new Ghostbusters movie? A new one?
Ghostbusters Afterlife? Hello, McFly?
To be honest, I haven't watched a movie in like 3 years.
Yeah. Oh, well, then you haven't seen this one. It was delayed for a long time because, the COVID thing, there was this pandemic, and they finally released it, and you can watch it now on your streaming service. And it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was actually better. There's this girl in it. She's 12 years old in the movie. She actually carries the entire movie. She's incredible.
All right. An endorsement from the very top. You guys heard it here first.
Yeah, I can't remember her name, and I apologize for that, but she's good.
The only thing I wanted to show here, you were talking about taking care of the environment. It was when I let go of the idea that Jesus isn't coming back. And then I would see things like this, which is there are places in the world where there's so much trash that it just fills the river. Look at that. And there are places in the ocean where there's just giant islands of plastic And it's only going to get worse, right? We've done that in the last 200 years, actually the last 100 years. And so it becomes insane.
Yep.
That's in Guatemala.
It's
I don't
literally
know.
that's a representation, whether it's
Guatemala.
the earth or your life. It's like, people, we know we get only one earth and there's a finite amount of resources on it. Same thing with your life. You get a finite amount of years. We know for sure this is the only planet we get. We know for sure, like, this is your life. There might be an extra one, there might be a bonus round, but for sure, like, take control, to bring it back to something that sounds very opposite to free will, but you guys know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
investigate the things and the reasons why you do the things you do, the religion that you adhere to, the reasons you love, or like, look and detangle yourself from dogmatic views. And so
Get curious
is what it's all about. I detangled myself from all the problematic ideas I had.
Mushrooms lie. They sometimes do. And you'll still learn something.
Mushrooms lie. You'll still learn something.
When it comes to our predetermined number of years, I sometimes feel like I'm past my expiration date.
No.
I do feel that way, like today. Well, it's like Carl Kolchak says in the first Night Stalker movie. He says, I become extinct in my own lifetime.
Way to bring us down.
I thought that would appeal to your nihilistic sensibilities.
No. Actually, you guys want to hear something, though?
What?
Nihilism, free will, determinism and nihilism is why I am also here today. Not only because I mentioned free will kind of got me off of the Mormon track, but and then you have to have a certain amount of like nihilism to see yourself as like, I'm not a spirit daughter, I'm not a chosen, like all of that shit that you're like, oh, I'm not part of like the really cool kids club that got the gospel, and you're like, well, what is the point of life and everything? And then I think everyone has to go through like a little bit of a nihilist phase and like, what's the meaning of it all? But I don't want to get a tattoo, but I really do just want to. I wear this circle every single day to remind me that life is like a circle, because it's fucking pointless.
All time and eternity.
Well, don't worry about the tattoo, because it's already predetermined whether you're going to choose to get one or not.
I do. Again, can I do another millennial reference that you guys don't get? I'm falling asleep in bed last night. Hi AF, by the way. Great realizations. Had a great time. But
I got the AF part, by the way.
Thanks. The kids get it out there. But like, there's this movie from 1989, Teen Witch. It was played on the Disney Channel my entire life. Top that. You guys know what I'm talking about. Teen Witch, fabulous movie. If anyone, hit me up on Instagram later and we'll wrap it back and forth. But there's this really beautiful part where she gets this necklace that she needed to become a witch. This teenager, she needed the necklace to become a witch for her powers to work. And she is like a reincarnated teenage witch. And her drama teacher tells her that like, it found its way to you. Like, if it's meant to be, it'll find its way to you. And that's just like, my number one problem in life is having anxiety over needing to remember a lot of things, because I can't just enjoy a podcast. I can't just enjoy a book, because I'm so anxious all the time that I have to remember everything and be able to say it on Mormonism Live on March 16th one day or something. But just being like, if these ideas, like these thoughts and stuff, letting go of this illusion of control that like I can always remember, I can always be in charge of everything. And just literally Teen Witch changed my life, because it's like, you know what, these things, if it's meant to be, it'll come back. And I don't need to just like strangle myself always trying to keep all of these ducks in a row.
The ring wants to be found, Carah.
Oh, exactly. Except for yours is like a great like literary classic, and mine is like something that played on the Disney Channel. Whatever.
Yeah, basically.
It's all basically the same thing.
All right, we're gonna move on. So
moving on.
We're gonna do a live call. We'll take some live calls here in a moment.
Do the moonwalk. That'll make you feel better.
Should I? Want me to?
Yeah, please. Okay. Woo! Nuancehoe is not my lover.
All right, evolution and profits.
I can't do that on Mormon Stories. Just kidding, I do.
Let's spend 10 minutes on it. Evolution and profits. What's your beef with evolution and profits?
What is my beef? It's the same beef as everything. Profits. What is the point of being a prophet, seer, and revelator if you're behind on every social issue, every scientific issue?
Because when the world gets here, then we get here. And then
Hey, Holland, have you heard of the internet? Because it's about to be all over it. Yeah. Yeah, my beef with prophets is the beef with everything. It's what gives us the confidence that you're prophets, seers, and revelators if you can't get basic things right? I understand things are confusing. Why are there gay people? Hey, let's figure that out. Like, I understand some things are confusing for you guys. Oh, people have different skin colors. That's confusing. But they always err on the side of being
wrong.
impervious. Yeah. Like, it's always on the worst side, you know? And it's not just like we don't know. It's like they take a definitive position on the wrong side. It's like, have you ever heard of this thing? Like, every time. Like,
except for immigration. I think they got immigration right before the rest of us got on board.
No, they got that wrong too. They're batting 100 or 1,000, excuse me. By the way, Carah, I think that it's better not to talk in terms of skin color. We should talk in terms of descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Thank you. I am the nuancehoe, and I am so nuanced on that one. Yeah.
That was a reference to anybody who happened to watch 5 hours of Rodney Meldrum expatiating this afternoon.
Yeah.
Sounds like you
Those
did.
People loving the Carah wisdom. Thanks, person J. Halvernut. Anyway, it's just the same old frustration. And so when I was, again, listening to all those podcasts and stuff, and I was listening to people talk about organic evolution and things, and the way that everything came into being, and they have a pretty tight case, you guys. Like, I've looked into it, seems pretty solid, and you have to reconcile that the prophet does not believe in evolution, and it was really painful that I have to sustain someone who, there's these quotes from Nelson where he'll say, like, don't you guys know that dogs have always been dogs, and that's just the way that it is, and I'm not a believer in evolution and stuff. And again, like, you think about Joseph Smith, he had scriptures and revelations, and what was the most pertinent things on his mind that he needed? Like, God was like, make sure to mention this, and this. And it's like, what about all of those, like, people with like black skin? Curse of Cain, put that in there. Book of Moses.
Coffee.
It's like, that's what God thought was super duper important. Section 132, make sure we know that single people, they are in the next life. Put that in there. Other things like age of the earth, people have been debating it. Joseph, put that in there. 7,000 young earth creation. So Joseph Smith, the prophet of the restoration, I don't know why there's Mormons, like, to Rod Meldrum's credit, like, me and John complimented him continually that he is doing a literal interpretation of the book says what it says, and he believes what it says. And then that's why I was never a progressive Mormon, because it didn't make sense, because there's no nuance in this. There's no reason to uphold these people as prophets who uphold this scripture if it's saying such, asinine, insane things, right? So
we were talking earlier, and I think we both agreed that the reason, or one of the reasons, that Rod Meldrum is so popular among many thousands of Latter-day Saints is because he is bravely maintaining the field that church leaders have abandoned.
I think he makes his bed with money at night, though. So bravely, yes and no. But I see, yeah, the point has been made.
Isn't it strange? Mormonism, I've made this argument on the show before. Mormonism knows less and less every day. Like, we no longer know that we get our own planet. We no longer know where the Garden of Eden is.
The main selling points.
Yeah. So having prophets, seers, and revelators has actually led to distance away from revelation and certainty. And now everything is ambiguous, unknown, or contradicted.
That's the nuancehoe's argument too. Like, when you are confronted with information, everyone can start from a very orthodox lens. You can be raised, I know a lot of people, like ex-Mormons now, right, that were raised on a farm, homeschooled by preppers, right? Like, very orthodox upbringing. And then they move to a different city and they get more inputs of knowledge. They read more books. Every single thing in the world is anti-Mormonism, because if it doesn't uphold the precepts of the gospel, evolution, or, treating gay people nicely, whatever it is, like, the more you come in contact with ideas that are outside of your orthodoxy, you are forced to nuance, because you know too much now to go back to orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And everybody I know, that's how they made their way out of the world. They thought Mormonism was this, and then suddenly the selling points of what they know, what they what they purport to know, what they purport you can do, whether it's receive personal revelation, they reel that back. Like every single thing becomes more nuanced and less strong as time goes by and as science advances and as the internet advances. Like, Mormons, wake up. Like, this is why I was so angry today. I called both of these guys right here as I was leaving Mormon Stories today, because like I just said, everything, the world is anti-Mormon. The world, science, everything is anti-Mormon. But we know it exists, like trans people exist. You know it exists, like loving gay couples exist. And if your religion is so dogmatic that it won't let you actually love people in the lifetime that you know that you get, then what is the point? Plus, you don't even get a planet. Not worth it.
Yeah, what is the
I know
whole
that
plan of
planet was a
salvation
big
if you don't
selling
get one?
point for me.
Yeah, that's what I know. I mean, it was for me until I realized that I was just going to be perpetually pregnant. That's like, you guys know, that's like literally the plight of like a Mormon woman.
The world
in
must be
heaven
peopled.
Is a literal, you have a body where you're perpetually pregnant. Like, that's
sounds like fun, doesn't it?
Point.
Sounds like a
It
blast.
Yeah.
By the way, you mentioned a phrase earlier, Carah, that I want to just mention, that if I ever get around to writing my memoir, I already have the title selected, and that is this: The
Is it
Mormon.
an Alf quote? Sorry.
No, but that's not a bad idea, actually. It's this: The Mormon Who Knew Too Much.
Ding, ding, ding. Perfect.
Thank you. I'm claiming it
The
here. I
Mormon
got
who
dibs.
knew
Nobody
too
else
much is
take
called
that,
Next
okay?
Mormon. Yeah, and can I just say something else that's really important to me if we're wrapping up or whatever? One of my most popular TikToks of all time, because I'm just a TikTok influencer and occasionally I say good things, whatever. Anyway, is something that was really popular, and people, I did speeches on this because people like this TikTok so much. So influencers can really go influence, you know? And it was this idea that the reason why I became an atheist and the reason that I left Mormonism was a simple dichotomy between orthodoxy and empathy. And for the longest time, I picked orthodoxy. And when I was confronted with two choices, I went, boom, pick orthodoxy. All right, like gay marriage, I don't know what to pick. I'll pick the orthodoxy of the church. Okay, now the November 2015 policy and like gay families with kids are now being excluded and ostracized and all of that bullshit. And I'm like, I'm going to choose empathy. And then I just kept choosing empathy over orthodoxy, and using that muscle, and realizing how people are being hurt, and that orthodoxy does not serve the value of caring for people that was honestly instilled in the church. Like that empathy, like value, that was really placed in there by my Mormon upbringing. Like, I had a good Mormon upbringing. I wasn't traumatized by the church. The only trauma was finding out it wasn't true. So like, I kept choosing that empathy, and it almost was like a stepping stone or a block to get me out of this crevasse called Mormonism. I just chose empathy over and over again. And then I'm still stuck within a different crevasse, which was believing in God and believing that he sent his son to die, to fill a loophole in a law that he created, and that he needs blood and all of that and stuff. And then just going with the same realizations that, like, again, everything we were talking about earlier was like dogma and logical fallacies of like, none of this over here makes sense. So all of that is to say, things work out in my brain when I really recognize this is the one life that I most likely get. If there's a bonus round, super cool. Love that. But for now, I know that this is the life that I get. I'm going to have to keep choosing empathy and religion and dogma and orthodoxy and adherence to that. It doesn't serve me, and I don't think it serves society at large.
Amen.
Can I make a passing observation, Carah?
I hope it's good.
Oh, I don't know. I found it interesting. The number of times a person who does not believe in free will used the verb choose in the past 5 minutes.
Yeah, it is language that, if you understand the arguments around free will, it's still the same verbiage, but to actually choose it, the instinct to choose empathy was not an actual active choice necessarily. If I could respin the world and go back to 2019 again, I still would have made the same choices. I didn't have the ability to choose anything different because of the conditioning that that's already been set in place by things that were out of my control. So choose it's the language that we use, and it's literally everything about free will. Still, you have to operate in a world like it
Yeah.
exists. So we
Our
still
brain still
use the
tells us
same
it's
language. Yeah. Yeah.
If you had chosen orthodoxy every time, though, you could have been Rodney Meldrum.
And I could have made the co-host of Mormon Stories go home a day and cry, but I can't do that either.
All right, let's take a few phone calls and we'll get you home so you can get a nap. You're already at home. You can crawl right in that bed behind you and take a long nap.
By the way, are you
Straight
in
through the night.
any need of legal representation after today's events?
Yeah. So, guys, funny enough, I was driving home. I bottled up all my frustration. If you guys know what I'm talking about, if you guys go check my Instagram, I kind of had the time labeled on one of my Instagram stories of like where it really started to like take off on Mormon Stories today, where it was like, holy shit, like it was pretty effed up. So I bottled all that in. I had to come prepare for this, and we had this whole discussion. It was really kind of upsetting to a lot of people, especially a lot of LGBTQ folks, about what, you give a fundamentalist type Mormon a microphone for 5 hours. If you were to leave completely feeling fine and fantastic, there might be something wrong with you. I'm just saying. But anyway, I get into the car and I'm like, let me turn on some music. And as soon as I turn the music, I'm just like, I'm just like, what the freak just happened? What the freak just happened? And he said a lot of the things that were upsetting. And I realized that my parents think that he is just the greatest guy in the world. And I'm like, holy shnikes, these ideas are so harmful. Anyway, I basically was trying to figure out if I wanted to record this and share it on an Instagram story or something. So I had my phone like this down here and I was just like driving and talking. And I kind of sped a little bit and I am crying. I'm not an emotional gal. Like, you guys know me. Like, I am crying and I am pissed and I am like, F the world. I got pulled over. I was like so discombobulated. I didn't even know how to pull over my car. Like, that's how I was just like, didn't have my license on me or anything. I was just like, hi, officer, tears streaming down my face, all my eye makeup over my face. And then I remember a TikTok I saw the other day that says, if a cop like wants to do anything with you, you just say like, I want my lawyer. And it was so convenient that I was like hovering over like RFM's like phone number in my phone. I was like, if you fuck with me, officer, like I will call my lawyer right now. But he was nice. He just gave me a ticket.
For driving while distraught.
Yeah. I told him, he rolled down the window. I was like, hi, I was crying before you got here. Don't flatter yourself. Anyway.
There's this old thing, by the way.
Move on.
There's this old thing that officers, when they stop someone who's driving, they may or may not have been drinking. They'll frequently look at the eyes and say, your eyes look bloodshot. Have you been drinking? And the response is, well, your eyes look glazed. Have you been eating donuts? Okay, never mind. Not going to go over
I like that one.
Okay.
It's not as good as my joke. You guys know my favorite, very punny, corny joke, right? About my nose.
What about your nose?
A lot of people comment on the internet about how crooked my nose is. See, I look down, straight down, and I say, "You're right. My nose is so crooked. I got it from Curtin McConkie."
Oh, that's a good one. But with your nose, I think you have no trouble choosing the right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Remember, like Basil Rathbone playing Sherlock Holmes once said in response to a quip about the size of his nose, he said, "Remember, Watson, that throughout the ages, prominent men have had prominent noses."
I feel that deeply in my soul.
Okay, we're gonna go to some phone calls. You ready?
Okay. There are listeners who want to call in.
What's that?
There are listeners who want to call in.
We do. We'll take 3 phone calls and we'll move on with the night and end this so that Carah's been on the air now for like 8 hours minus a couple. So
yeah.
We'll move it along. So Ethan is on the line. Ethan, you're on Mormonism Live with Radio Free Mormon Bill Reel and Carah Burrell, nuancehoe. What do you got for us?
Carah, you're so awesome. You and John, that you were able to stomach that.
You watched it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I haven't listened to today's episode, but I listened to the one from a couple weeks ago,
okay.
And I actually was genuinely surprised that you let him come back on. I was kind of like, what the hell? Like, why is this guy getting a platform? You said some really messed up stuff. I have my best friend is a person of color, and he and I have had a lot of conversations about it. And I found it to be pretty egregious. I guess it's not getting as much coverage as the Brad Wilcox stuff because he's more of a niche kind of conspiracy nut guy and not like in the general young men's presidency, but I've I've wanted somebody to talk to about this because I'm just flabbergasted. I'm like, who the fuck? Like, is there somebody I can talk to about how insane this is? Sorry, Bill and RFM.
No, you're good.
This is
Clutching
just
girls.
it was insane. Anyway, just really impressed with both of you being able to maintain your composure on the last episode. Once again, gotta go listen to this episode and see how it went. I've been busy all day, but just appreciate the work that you both do. And yeah, that's just what I wanted to share.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
And I would love to hear back any comments you'd like to say back to that. But just thanks for doing that work with somebody so unhinged.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
job,
again, everything with its proper context and perspective. It's a systems, not people problem, right? Like Rod, super nice guy, has some opinions, not informed, right? The reasons they're not informed and the reasons he doesn't want to get informed are very much out of his control in a lot of ways. But I will give him kudos for sitting there. A lot of people will not sit there and take our hard line questioning. But to answer the question, like, why did we let him back on? Hey, John Dehlin, if you're watching this, don't fire me. But I really think it's because, if I'm being honest, Mormon Stories exists to educate people about the Mormon Church. And there's a lot of history that's been hidden, and there's a lot of harm that's been done. And we can do that through having people have long form interviews and discuss the way the church harmed them, obviously. What I think Rod represents is what a normal, regular man born in whatever 1969, whatever, raised in Cache Valley. What is a normal upbringing? What kind of opinions does Mormonism produce in a person? And it almost was like a legitimate version of Mormonism that you don't get on a video and audio, that's almost just there for history to see.
Right.
So just like it, sorry, Rod, if you ever see this, Jesus, but like, it reminds me of like the civil rights movements where there'd be people like picketing. I'm sorry, this is kind of an extreme example, but like, maybe it's not. But like going up and interviewing people, and they'll say outside, like when there's like segregation coming to their school, and they're like, I don't want the Negroes to come be in our school over here and stuff, you know, and you're like, those people really existed. It's not just you hear about it, and you have interviews with people who believe things. And so imagine if you could sit down with somebody who was like against segregation or whatever it would be in the time, you know what I mean? Like to really investigate why they believe what they believe and that they really uphold these ideas. And so if we want to highlight what Mormonism is, we kind of have to highlight the really uncomfortable, gross things. And so it's hard when I understand like it's triggering for a lot of people. And the most triggering thing that was to me today was like, there was this discussion towards the end where he was comparing like pedophilia and bestiality with people who want to rebel against God, just like gay people do. And my jaw would literally, you'll see, I was like, anyway, so it's bigger than that. It's the idea that the Heartland model that upholds this Book of Mormon, and then the Book of Mormon leads to people to be more dogmatic. The Heartland model and the Book of Mormon evidence, okay, that Rod perpetuates, causes people to be more dogmatic and more doubled down in their beliefs. And I told Rod this on the podcast today. If that belief in the Book of Mormon forces you to just be the most badass, like, Christian you've ever been, and you love tons of different people, cool. But unfortunately, from everything I know, from the way my parents treat me, because they're like Rod's #1 fan, it causes divisiveness, and it causes people to be more dogmatic and more sure of their beliefs and less nuanced and less empathetic, right? And I have a huge problem with that. So anyway, the reason why we had them on, even though he was on and had some racist ideas on the last one that, you know, a lot of people felt uncomfortable with, was me and John decided that like, what is his evidence? Let him present his evidence. I don't believe he had any. I believe everything. He was obviously cherry picking. If science dating worked for this time period, I will include that data. And if the science and dating of whatever doesn't work within my time period, then those are all like atheist scientist losers who are rebelling against God. Like I'm talking like fundamentalist ways of doing science here, right? Like always starting off with the presupposition that the church is true. So letting him present his evidence and his reasons to the furthest extent on display for all time and eternity.
I picture the Mesoamerican geography guys high-fiving during it, like, yeah, like that probably pulled more people our direction. Yeah, you know.
Right. That's right.
Yeah,
You know,
they were not. That no active Mormon in the world, though. I'm sorry, again, this is so mean, but like, at some point, you've got to say, "Oh God, what they're saying is so dumb." You have to say, "Oh, that's so dumb." Give me a 10-foot pole from whatever that is, you know.
Amen.
Anyway.
When I was watching Rod Meldrum on the first episode, I know it was part 3 today, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was watching the first episode a while back, and I was actually watching it, not just listening to it, but and I was struck by his mannerisms, the way he spoke. There's a certain nervousness to his humor, a certain regular stutter that he gives when he's talking. And I thought, this guy reminds me of somebody. Who is it? Who does this guy remind me of? And then it hit me. Rod Meldrum reminds me of a post-pubescent Kwaku.
Who's that? Never heard of them.
Post-pubescent or Kwaku?
Kwaku? I've never heard the name.
Oh,
and that's why I'm so happy. That's why I live a blissful life. The less references to Kwaku in my earphones, the better.
No, I like Kwaku. I think we get along fine. He's my brother from another mother. It's just sometimes you'll see people and they'll remind you of somebody else. And then when it hits you who it is, then you go, oh, that's right. That's who it is.
There it is. All right.
I'm
you ready for another call?
Before I say something I shouldn't say.
Yeah, here we go. FW. So FW is on Mormonism Live with Carah. What's on your mind tonight, FW?
Hey, I just wanted to share a thought that I've had lately about this whole concept of free will and all this that you guys have been talking about.
Okay, but that's not your thought, FW. I just want you to know that.
Yeah, we can
hear you. Yes, but you will understand this shortly, hopefully. Okay, so I'm a highly, I think in analogies, and this is one that's been in my mind a lot lately. And so just kind of bear with me and follow along. You need to kind of make some allowances here. But imagine, think about a tree, okay? Like the way that a tree grows. And it's not too hard to imagine it as like a thing that could have consciousness, in the sense that like it seems to have wants and needs. Like it reaches to gather in more light. Its roots are reaching down to find water and nutrients in the soil, and it could get sick. It has a point where it's born and a time when it dies and all this. So a tree has like a life, right? Well, we don't think of trees as being conscious, but imagine you're a rock and you see a tree. It would be, making that comparison, if you're a rock, this like inanimate object, it would be easy to look at a tree and say, oh, well, the tree has free will. The tree has consciousness. Like it has wants and needs, and it acts according to those wants and needs, and it seeks to accomplish something in its life. It's trying to grow. It's trying to flower. It's trying to do all these things. But we human beings, being like a more advanced, life form or form of consciousness, look at a tree and don't think of it as having wants and needs. We see it as just this thing that kind of happens. Like, oh yeah, the tree is there because an acorn fell and sprouted, and it's just nature acting out. Now try to put yourself in God's shoes. Just go along and, like if you don't believe in God or whatever, just like imagine God looking down at humanity. And and if you really work through that process of how we look at a tree and the way that it grows and like has this whole life of its own, but we don't think of the tree as making choices. It's just like a nature acting out, the way that it does, you can maybe start to look at like human life that way too, in the sense that like it's just kind of this thing that happens in the universe, and it's playing out, it's a happening, and you can start to look at the idea of like choice a little bit differently. And to wrap it up and put a bow on this whole thing, imagine if the tree is representing like consciousness, human consciousness in the universe. We as individuals are like the tiny little tips of the outermost extremities of those tree branches. There's like 8 billion little tips of this tree branch on the earth right now. And we're all thinking that we are individuals and we are distinct and separate from each other. And we're going about our business like trying to accomplish something and making all these choices without realizing that really we're all part of this one collective kind of consciousness. And it's just a way to put that like kind of real fuzzy, heady concept into something that's a little bit easier to wrap your head around. And I like to think about that. And anyway, I just felt like I should share.
FW?
Good. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm sorry. Kara's doing something. She's promoting a book of some sort.
I'm just saying that reminds me a lot of the things that Eckhart Tolle talks about in A New Earth, my new Bible. So that they're, I like that. I like that kind of talk. So anyway, that just reminded me of that. I can just, any reference, I can just pull it off my bookshelf right here. But I think it's helpful to view ourselves that way. I see it.
FW.
I already hung up with him, Martha. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well,
and I think I know who you are, FW. And if you're who I think you are, hi.
And if he's not who you think he is,
then FW.
But
so
you can't understand.
But what about, so if we take this analogy, we've got rock, we got tree, we got person, we've got God. Does God have free will?
He doesn't exist, so no.
But within the analogy,
putting
ourselves in the shoes of God,
him.
the sandals of God, I think God must have free will in that analogy, right? If not, let's say he does, because FW's gone, and I apologize for that. At some point, either nobody has free will, or there's got to be some kind of line of demarcation that gets crossed somewhere, maybe between a rock, maybe it's before a rock, I don't know, between a rock, a tree, a person, and God. Mm-hmm. And if there is a line of demarcation at any point, then why couldn't we say that the line maybe could be drawn sooner or later? Does your brain hurt? Are you getting a brain freeze? Is that a Slurpee you have in that cup?
No, it's your callers. Any love that anyone has for me is going to be gone if they hear what I'm drinking right now.
Oh.
It's iced milk. I'm sorry, it's weird.
It's okay. It's good because you got an upset stomach.
Right doing it.
I once heard somebody say the question was asked, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, does it make a sound, right? And the response from this person was, well, actually, I think that the question was inartfully asked at the time, not by me. But if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody know? Was the question, the way the question was asked. And the response from this other person was, well, his fellows know.
The fellow trees?
Yes.
If sound is just waves of movement being registered in our ears, if there's no ears to hear the sound, then there's no sound.
Right. And I think that's a technical answer for the question about if nobody's around, does it make a noise? But like I say, for some reason, that question was asked a different way. And the answer that the person gave was, well, his fellows know. His fellow trees know. Yeah, they know he fell.
His brothers in Christ.
Before you take the next call, can I give you another hypothetical? Primo hypothetical. Do you have time?
Sure. By all means.
We've got 5 hours. We're going for 5 hours tonight.
Right.
Didn't I mention that to you?
Like an equal and opposite response. Like if I have had this much negativity, I need like so many positivities.
There must be opposition in all things. Go ahead.
You're going to finish my thought. You didn't even have free will to think it. It just, the universe gave it to you. It just was there.
Second too. Absolutely.
Boom. So the idea is, let me pose this question to you. If you are asleep on a Sunday morning and you are making the choice, let's say, to sleep in your bed and not get up and leave your house for an entire Sunday. You just stay in your bed the entire day. And then you find out later on that somebody came into your house and actually locked your door and bolted it closed.
From the inside?
So that you were in your room, but you had no idea you couldn't have left because it was bolted closed, for instance.
Okay.
Let's just say it was impossible for you to even leave.
This
Did
is
you
like shooting a
actually
dead
have
body.
Did you actually have the free will to stay in your room? You chose did you choose to stay in your room? Did you have the free will to stay in your room if the choice wasn't actually there, but you didn't know the choice wasn't there?
See?
Think about that. It's a thinker.
Well, it kind of sounds like,
Sit on that.
you know, if God's all powerful, can he create a rock so big he can't lift it?
Can he?
Can Jesus microwave a burrito so hot that he cannot eat it?
That kind of thing.
Yeah. I said that on Mormon Stories once, and people were like, Carah, you have to give credit. Reference. It's a Simpsons reference.
And I listened and I laughed.
Great.
All right, let's finish with one last call, and then we'll call it a night
Finish
here.
strong.
We've got Mike, and he wants to talk about free will as well. So, Mike, you're on Mormonism Live with Carah Burrell, the nuancehoe. And what's on your mind tonight?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Love you guys. Love the show. I'm an ex-Mo from Las Vegas and grew up in the 80s, left when the internet came out, and have lived a very thriving life, a very happy life, following true principles and just following true principles, golden rule, blah, blah, blah. You don't need religion, whole 9 yards. But you know what? I convince people every day. I talk to people on the phone in my business, and I convince people all the time that God exists using evidence. And then I can also, I don't have time here, obviously, but I do want to touch on a couple things that you guys were talking about for free will. Every morning when I wake up, I say to myself, great things are going to happen today. I can't wait to see what it is. And I say that affirmation. It's a positive affirmation. It's based on the law of attraction. And it manifests in many, when I remember to say it, it really, it creates miracles. Now, is the miracle that I said, that affirmation, was my free will to say it? Sometimes I forget. But here's the way I see free will. Our decisions, the decisions that we make, they create train tracks. And when you're at a train station, you have tracks that go left, right, center. Some of them go south, some go north, some go east. The track that you go on is the decision that you make. If you make a bad decision, you end up in prison, you lose your free will. If you make a good decision and you work out, you become a bodybuilder. You make another one, you can become a lawyer like the RFM and become a famous Mormon guy. But and so it's our decisions that actually shape our future. Now, God, you guys are right. There, about religion. All religion teach belief, and belief is the enemy. Belief is the enemy of imagination. Belief is the Jesuits say, if you give me a child until he's 7, I'll give you a man. Because the first 7 years of life, our brain to be programmed, it's set up to be hypnotized. It's just the way we were created by evolution, so that we don't stick our hand in the fire, so that we don't jump off we listen to our parents, because that's the way we were created for a reason. Now, when it comes to, do we have free will? Because we were programmed. I like to think of ourselves as conscious agents, the way Donald Hoffman, in his famous book, The Proof Against Reality.
Hey, Mike, can I interrupt for a second? Yeah. Mike, I apologize. I want you to keep your train of thought. I just want to interject that I get uncomfortable with any saying that starts with a Jesuit priest saying, "Give me a boy until he's 7 years old."
There you go, FM. Love your humor, my friend.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you know what? Think about the thing. You're right, because what do? They molest them. They shatter the brain into 1,250 compartments. I mean, that's an occult. If you look at the Crowley and Black Magic, anyway, that's a whole different subject. Yeah, they practice that kind of magic. It's
my good friend Alistair.
Here's the thing, and I do want you to comment on this idea, RFM, before I finish. In court, in case you present evidence to try to come up with a verdict of truth, and if you don't have all the evidence, can you really know the truth? And the answer is no. Someone is hiding evidence. That's why the court set up a protocol where you have to hand over all the evidence you have, otherwise you're breaking the rules.
If you're the prosecutor in a criminal case,
our
yes, that's
society,
true.
we have, so in our society, we have something called intelligence agencies that hide evidence. So can we really say, and then down through the ages, we've had secret societies that have hidden evidence. So can we really say we know the truth about anything if we don't have access to all of the evidence? That's what I want you to comment on, Arthur. I'm knowing about the process of evidence and truth. And we don't concentrate on that enough. People could say they believe in evolution, but do we have all of the evidence that proves it? The answer is no. Did you guys know that there's not one dinosaur bone in a museum? Those are all fakes. They're all plaster of Paris. They find a little bone and they use an artist's imagination to come up with this beautiful creature that never existed. Now, is that
I'm sorry, if you want me to comment about that.
Yeah, go ahead and comment on that. I'm done. Thanks for listening.
No, that's fine. I was talking with it's actually Colby. I think it's okay if I mention his name, Colby Reddish. I was talking with him on the phone. I was giving him a break from the Rod Meldrum marathon.
So happy you talked to him. Colby's a good one.
I called him and I said, "So do you need a break right about now?" This was around 11:30 this morning. So he says, "Oh yeah," and we started talking a little bit about science. And how, and this is, I'm trying to address at least what I think of as one of the important things you said here, Mike. It's Mike. But very early on in the first episode, Rod Meldrum was immediately trying to discount science. And it was very clear to me why he was doing that up front. And what he was saying is science never has the final say because it's always open to being changed, improved upon when new information comes on. Therefore, what he was getting at, this is Rod Meldrum, was that science really doesn't get to have a seat at the table when we're talking about truth, because science is by its very nature susceptible to change. It has changed. It will likely change in the future. Okay. And it was very clear to me what he was doing. Is he's setting the groundwork to say any science that agrees with me, good. Any science that doesn't agree with me, bad. And of course, that's what he ended up doing. But what I mentioned to Colby was that, yeah, technically that's true. And we were talking about this cosmos that the ancient Hebrews and other ancient peoples had of the universe with the flat earth, the waters underneath, the crystalline dome called the firmament in the Old Testament, in which the stars, sun, and moon are embedded, and above which is additional water. Okay. And we were talking about that was the ancient concept. And this is what Rodney Meldrum is trying to justify. He is saying that is true. That's not just ancient. That's God-given truth about the way things really are. So we're going to use science today in a very bastardized kind of way, excuse my language, to try and support an ancient worldview, which has been discounted by science because it's obviously wrong. It worked for them. It doesn't account for anything that we know today. So having said all of that, what I said was, yeah, science is always changing, but science, even though it changes, is never going to change from the earth being a sphere that goes around the sun to a flat earth with a crystalline dome over it and water above and water beneath. Okay, that water beneath, that's never going to happen. So while it's true in a general sense that, yeah, science is changing and that's one of its strengths, there are certain areas that science is never going to change to. And I think I'm okay in saying that. I hope I am. There's a certain trajectory of science. Sure, there are surprises every now and then, but that surprise is never going to be, hey, guess what? We found out the earth is actually flat. That Apollo 11 moon landing, fake. No, that's never going to happen. And so this idea that science doesn't really get to have a say because it's always changing, I think can be taken to an extreme. And I think that's what Rodney Meldrum did in order to support the unscientific nature of his hypothesis.
That last caller was right on one point. And hear me out. I want you guys just to hear me out.
Yeah.
When we were kids, there was Triceratops.
Yeah.
There was Stegosaurus.
Yes.
There was pterodactyl.
Are you getting to Brontosaurus now?
Yeah, pterodactyl and Brontosaurus, right? Those were and Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Oh, yes.
Those were the 5 main dinosaurs.
Yes.
Brontosaurus doesn't exist, by the way. Brontosaurus was fake news.
He was,
so,
he was
at least in part.
He was fake
I
news.
can't
Like
take
50
any more bad news today.
No, he was like fake news 50 years before the 1960s when I'm reading the kids' book with him in it. This was so late to catch up to the kids' books, at least, about Brontosaurus not existing. I mean, they had him in King Kong, right, in 1933. But go ahead, tell us about the Brontosaurus and why it is he never existed.
Just that somehow science messed up and Brontosaurus was a mix-up of bones.
Yeah, it was
and
a head.
Brontosaurus never existed. There are other dinosaurs similar to Brontosaurus, but we lost him kind of like Pluto.
Yeah, they put the head of one dinosaur on the body of another or something like that.
Yeah.
And they thought they went together. That was the Brontosaurus. Later on, they found out, oops, we made a mistake. This head actually doesn't belong here. It belongs over here on whatever the other dinosaur was. I don't know if it was a Diplodocus or what, but Gesundheit. But so you never hear about Brontosauri anymore because science decided, oops, we kind of got that mixed up like Peking Man.
Yeah. And we lost Pluto too. Man. Science.
Pluto.
You know?
That's a travesty. Pluto. I'm going to start a petition to bring Pluto back as a planet.
All right, I'm almost where Carah was at when she was done with Meldrum's interview.
Make Pluto great again.
Anything else from you guys?
From me?
Anything?
Are we wrapping up?
Wrap it. This is it. This is the closing.
Congratulations to everyone who got through today.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Amen.
Enjoy.
Have a great day.
Something stronger than milk.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nuance.
Wait. Before we go, before we go, wait.
Yes.
We are doing a game with Bill Real on
I love it.
Sunday. Yes, on the
Sunday?
Discord. We're going to be playing Moral Dilemma. I was going to announce that at the beginning, and I totally forgot.
No.
So yeah,
Do you guys have a Discord?
Facebook page? Yeah, we have joined the Mormon Stories Discord, so that's the Discord that we are on. And so yeah, I've already got a link up there, but I'll just repost it just to get it up again. So yeah,
Bless you.
if you want to come in and play along with Bill and make a case for what decision you would make in the Moral Dilemma. It should be fun.
It's a fun game, by the way. You get put right on the line of two, like a Sophie's choice of things you don't want to do, but you got to pick one. And then we get to have a conversation about why you picked what you did or why I picked what I did. And it will be quite interesting, I think.
That's great.
Cool.
I didn't know that. Thank you for announcing it. I'm glad Bill is playing this game because as an attorney, one of the side benefits is that I never have a moral dilemma.
You sold that away a long time ago. Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.